darlings, in this video I'll show you how to sew a corner on a sewing machine. This technique is particularly useful for sewing projects such as cushion covers and tote bags, as well as garments including collars, cuffs and pockets. Using a ruler and tailor's chalk or a vanishing pen, measure and mark the corner in relation to your seam width size on the wrong side of the fabric. For example, my seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, which is one of the most common seam allowances used in garment sewing. I'm using a patchwork ruler because I find it quicker and easier for squaring up corners, and then I'm using a vanishing pen to mark the corner point. I'm also going to mark the points where I'll decrease the stitch length to reinforce the corner. Place the marks about 5 centimeters or 2 inches away from the corner point on both sides. This creates extra strength around the corner, which is especially useful in areas that may experience strain. Depending on your fabric, it's best practice to secure your seam before machine sewing. For example, I'm sewing a lightweight calico fabric, so I've pinned the layers together. Make sure the right sides of the fabric are facing together before securing the seam. I also have a video all about different ways to secure seams before sewing, which I've linked in the description below, so check that out if you'd like more detail. Before we start sewing, make sure your machine is set up correctly. Every sewing machine is a little different, so always refer to your sewing machine manual for the best guidance. That means using the correct needle and thread for your fabric, attaching a standard zigzag presser foot, threading the machine properly, and doing a quick test stitch on scrap fabric to check the tension. For example, I'm using a lightweight calico fabric, a size 70 or 10 universal needle, polyester sew-all thread, and a standard zigzag presser foot. My machine is set to a centre aligned straight stitch, a stitch length of 2.5, and a thread tension of 4. If you're unsure how to do this, I've linked related videos in the description below with more detail to help you. Pull the presser foot lever upwards to raise the presser foot. Place the layers of fabric under the presser foot, aligning the fabric edge with the seam guideline on the throat plate. As my seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, I'll be aligning the edge of the fabric to that guide on the throat plate. If your throat plate markings are difficult to see, place a strip of tape on the machine bed to create a more visible guide. You can also use the magnetic seam guide, which attaches directly to the throat plate. Turn the hand wheel towards you to lower the needle into the fabric about 1 centimeter from the edge. Smooth both threads towards the back of the machine. This helps prevent tangling and keeps the stitches neat when you begin sewing. Push the presser foot lever downwards to lower the presser foot and hold the fabric in place. Lightly hold the threads and gently press the foot pedal to sew a couple of stitches forward. Release the threads, then press and hold the reverse stitch button. Sew a few stitches backwards to secure the seam and prevent it from unravelling. Make sure you stitch directly over the line you just sewed. For fine or delicate fabrics, skip this step as backstitching may cause the seam edge to pucker. Release the reverse stitch button and continue sewing forwards. Gently guide the fabric along the seam guideline, allowing the feed dogs to move the fabric naturally. And remember, never sew over pins, so remove them as you go. Sew along the seam and stop sewing at the first reinforcement point that was marked earlier. Reduce the stitch length slightly. In this case, I'm turning the stitch length dial from 2.5 down to 2 for a stronger, neater corner. Continue sewing slowly until you reach the corner point. This is the most important step. When you reach the corner, make sure the needle is lowered fully into the fabric. You can do this by turning the hand wheel towards you, or if you have a digital machine, using the needle down function. The needle acts like a pivot point and keeps your stitching in place while you turn the fabric. Pull the presser foot lever upwards to raise the presser foot. Carefully rotate or pivot the fabric 90 degrees so the fabric edges line up with the seam guide for your next seam. Lower the presser foot. Continue sewing along the seam and stop sewing at the second reinforcement point. Set the stitch length back to its original setting. In this case, I'm changing the stitch length from 2 back to 2.5. Continue sewing the seam as usual. And that's how you sew a neat corner on a sewing machine. Now that you've sewn your seam, you'll usually need to finish the raw edges and then press the seam. I've linked videos on both those techniques in the description below. For more sewing Bexpertise, I've linked helpful videos in the description below. Please don't forget to subscribe, and as always, happy sewing!